Hi, you're listening to Baachu Talk FM, a podcast for facilities and workplace services professionals. My name is Bhaskar, and I'll be sitting down with our industry leaders to share their stories, discuss their career, and learn how to make an impact in the FM industry. Today's guest is Thomas Tom L. Mitchell. Thomas, as we fondly call him, Tom, is an IFMA Fellow, CFM, Chartered FMs, Chartered FMJ, is a seasoned professional with over 35 years of experience in facilities and asset management. Currently serving as the Senior Vice President and Chief Operations Officer at FM3IS Associates, LLC. Tom is committed to improving organization performance by focusing on workforce competency and optimizing the workplace. He has held leadership positions in government, commercial, and not-for-profit industries as well. Tom's extensive background includes serving in the U.S. Air Force for 20 years as a civil engineer officer, overseeing the development and management of facilities in various locations worldwide. He also has played significant role in the International Facility Management Association, IFMA, serving on the Global Board of Directors and receiving the prestigious IFMA Fellow designation. In addition to his current role, Tom is actively involved in academia, serving as a chairman of Florida A&M University's Facilities Management Degree Program Academic Advisory Council, and as an adjunct faculty member at the University of Texas at San Antonio. He holds multiple degrees and certifications related to FM. Tom is a sought-out speaker, contributor to the FM industry. He has presences at various international conferences and shared his expertise through publications and interviews. With his wealth of knowledge and experience, Tom is an excellent guest, as you know, and welcome to Baachu Talk FM, Tom. So excited to have you.
I am very pleased and honored to be here with you, and thank you very much for the invitation, sir.
Thank you, Tom. Tom, let's go back to the very beginning about your early life. Where were you born and where were you raised?
Okay. Well, I was born in the Bronx, New York. I spent my first 4 years in a suburb of the Bronx called Mount Vernon, New York. And then after that, my parents, who were both from Tallahassee, Florida, decided they were going to move back home. That was not what I wanted, but I lost that and ended up moving to Tallahassee. So let me give you a little context. The reason why I was born in New York, as opposed to Tallahassee, which is the home of my parents, where they still are today, as a matter of fact, is because my father did something that required him to be headquartered in Washington, D.C. Let me preface this before I move on. What I'm about to tell you is not genetically acquired. It is something that you developed. I don't know if you've heard of the Harlem Globetrotters. That's okay. They are an entertainment-based professional basketball team.
Oh, wow. A
lot of the players actually came from the national level leagues. So of course, we know them today is then we had the ABA, and of course, now we have what people recognize now as the NBA. With these professional caliber players, there was an individual who decided that perhaps there could be a way of exposing people not only to their professionalism, but also their entertainment value. So they literally were performers with incredible skills. My father was one of them. So he served as a member of the Globetrotters from 1961 to 1964. As a matter of fact, he didn't see me until I was about 4 months old, according to my mother, because Dad was playing with the Harlem Globetrotters literally in East Germany at the time. The Trotters had such high international acclaim, particularly during that period, that they could go to places that most Americans could not go. So literally people behind the quote unquote Iron Curtain got a chance to see America's ambassadors by watching my father play. He actually met with the Pope as well as a couple of others. Oh, yes, absolutely. So Dad, of course, was based in New York City. He married my mother. My mother joined him in New York. Me, my brother, and sister came as a result of that. But then my grandmother was starting to feel ill. And my father wanted to make sure that he was close to her. She still lived in Tallahassee, hence the move there.
Wow, what a fascinating story straight away, Tom. Thank you. And growing up from, starting born in New York, raised in Tallahassee, what are the childhood memories that you can remember?
Well, I remember the days when you did not have to lock your door. I remember the days where teenagers and younger played outdoors. We did not have these screens that occupy the kids of today's time. We actually got fresh air and we exercised. Friendships that still last to this day. I was born in 1964 and I still stay connected with these friends of mine who I grew up with in New York. Even when we moved to Tallahassee, although the culture was different. As a matter of fact, my best friend is actually from Nigeria. We met over 40 years ago because when we both came to Tallahassee, it was like we both came from a different country. He really did, from Nigeria. But the culture in that part of the United States was so different than the culture in the northeastern part of the United States. I literally was a fish out of water. So we bonded. But even with that change, people, I think, were much closer. They were far more integrated. I had individuals who knew me, though I did not know them because they knew my father. So if I strayed away from doing the right thing, I was reminded by people in the neighborhood, hey, I know your parents taught you better than that. And they were right. So I had a lot of fun during my childhood years, and I still relish them. And it's been difficult trying to develop that same type of experience for our children because, as you know, I'm military. So the military moves around quite a bit. But we try to develop that kind of cohesiveness within our family and certainly friends that we connected with along the way. Matter of fact, some of my best friends that I met while serving on active duty, my children call them aunt and uncles because that's the closeness that we developed. So it was a wonderful experience.
Nice. So doing your early schools and your higher schools there, did you move to the U.S. Army immediately, or when did U.S. Air Force, sorry, straight after?
That's okay. That's okay, because you actually referred to what I did similar to what my father did. He kept insisting and saying that I joined the Army. Literally, it was the Air Force. I'll give you some context on that.
Yes.
If someone had told me that I would be joining the U.S. military a year before I did, I would have thought they were insane. Because admittedly, during that time frame, the kind of imagery that I had of the military wasn't very positive. It was more slapstick, making jokes, part of comedies, situation comedies and things like that. So what happened was I'm at university and I'm doing not only a full-time academic load, but I also was working part-time at 3 different jobs. Now, fortunately, one of them was an engineering firm, but needless to say, the time that I spent working at these jobs was time away from my academic studies. And of course, my performance was affected accordingly. I actually initially wanted to join the United States Navy, not for the best reasons, though. Movies came out. The first movie, most people know the second one, but the first movie that set the tone for naval recruiting was the original Top Gun.
Wow.
I was in university when that movie came out, and yes, I was inspired. Not because of American patriotism, But because that uniform did something when it came to developing female relationships, okay? And there were a couple of other movies like that too. So I said, I'm an Officer and a Gentleman also came out during that same time frame. So I am going to join the Navy. So I go to the Naval Reserve Officer Training Corps Detachment at my undergrad school. And I told the lieutenant that I would like to join. He asked for my background. I told him I'm getting a degree in architecture. Unfortunately, he told me that there was no need for someone like me. Now, I learned later on that was not the case. Obviously, there's facilities on these naval bases, but that was not his experience. He was a ship driver, so he's responsible for sailing ships. So he did not know about what we do. But I took him at his word. So I left. It worked out better anyway, because not long afterwards, I met someone who was working at the Air Force Reserve Officers Training Corps. That was over at Florida State University. I told him about my interest in joining the service and how I would not have the opportunity I thought I would have at the Navy. He says, "Oh, are you kidding? Not only do we have work for you at Air Force installations, we will give you a technical scholarship and a stipends." I thought that was nice. No more 3 jobs. I wouldn't have to worry about tuition because that was being paid for by my parents at the time. And I had a job guarantee when I graduated, applying the knowledge that I acquired at university. Sweet deal. Yes. So I did that. But to be completely candid with you and everyone listening, I did it for selfish reasons. I really saw it as a means of my being able to earn money, applying the knowledge that I acquired at the School of Architecture, so that after I finished my 4-year commitment, then I would transition to the private sector, which was my original intention. But I was surprised to learn something. My experience throughout my entire Air Force career was one about how individuals selflessly gave of their most valuable resource, their time and their talent, in order to work together to achieve mutually acceptable goals and objectives, and how we really operated like a family. Now, I told you about the importance of my youth and how I was able to bond with those who I grew up with. Well, I experienced that same type of camaraderie and experience throughout the entire course of my military service. So it was very rewarding for me, not only just as an opportunity for me to develop my knowledge and skills as a practicing professional, but also be able to work with others who may not necessarily have my background, but we each realized that we were a part of a whole. And if we work together, we can be successful in unity.
Wow. 20 years in the Air Force, you might have seen a lot. And is that where you kind of started to experience the very first time facilities management, or did you have a glimpse of your facilities career even before?
That's another funny story. I never heard of the facility management profession as a global profession until about 10 years after I had begun my military service as a military architect. Let me share what happened. I began like most Air Force officers do, who are considered civil engineering officers. That is our occupational skill designation. Even though we're more than just civil engineering personnel, meaning those who acquire a degree at university for civil engineering. The entire built environment is within this entire career field. And we have different designators that will specify what is your academic background. Since I had a degree in architecture, my suffix was A. If you had an electrical degree, your suffix was E. So very logical in terms of identifying the specific skill code that an individual brought. Well, I began in design and construction, what we at IFMA consider to be project management.
Mm.
I did that for half of my time at my first duty station. Then I got an opportunity to work over in what we called readiness and operations, which now translates to what we recognize as emergency preparedness and risk management in terms of FM competency. I left that location, went to Washington, D.C., went back into project management, but this time I was managing the work of architectural engineering firms, and it was for minor construction projects, projects that you would normally use operations and maintenance funding to pay for. The work that I did in my previous location, that was major capital investment funding. We had different terminology for it, but it was the same concept and application.
Mm.
About halfway during my time in the Washington, D.C. area, I moved to another Air Force base where I now got to immerse myself in operations and maintenance.
Okay.
Now, I still had not heard of the term facility management the way you and I understand it today. In the Air Force, a facility manager was an individual from a user organization who had an additional duty of capturing any operations and maintenance requirements that have to be performed in their facilities, submitting it on a form to the base civil engineer unit, which is what I was a part of. And then we would dispatch our technical personnel, our HVAC people, our electricians, to now address whatever it is that needed to be done as described in that work order request. So when I heard the term facility management, it wasn't you and I. It was somebody, it was a customer who submitted a work order request.
Mm.
And that's the way that continued until 1998.
Wow.
Because I'm going to fast forward now to my literally coming to here in San Antonio the first time. While I was working in operations, I worked directly for a major who I later reconnected with when I relocated to San Antonio, and he was a lieutenant colonel. So when we got together, again, family, so there's somebody who you knew from a previous location, bonding occurred, so we continued to keep in contact with one another. He said, Tom, I want you to go to an IFMA meeting. I'm still relatively young and dumb at that time, and I have a degree in architecture. Sometimes there's a level of arrogance that's carried with that. So when now Colonel Sinclair tells me he wants me to go to this local chapter meeting, my first thought was, I don't think so. Because if it was worth anything, I would know about it already. So again, very dumb. And admittedly, the military tends to be very myopic. I'll use that word, meaning we work with our own. If we need a contractor, we will retain their services. And after they're done, thank you very much. So we really didn't expand our aperture beyond what we needed to take care of our internal needs. But Colonel Sinclair was a good supervisor. He was a good mentor and a good friend. So if he was suggesting I go to this meeting, he sees some value in it. And I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that there will be something there that would benefit me. So I went. And even to this day, I was stunned at what I experienced. It's actually what motivates me even now. And again, this is 1998. I went to the chapter meeting and I saw individuals that did the exact same thing I did across the spectrum of the building cycles. But they did it without a uniform. They also did it without bombs, bullets, and chemical warfare training, which I had to know because of the military part of it. But for some reason, it just didn't dawn on me, even though I started off as a civilian, that there was an entire global community of facility professionals each of them with different skills, knowledge, and experience, no differently than the occupational series that we had as a member of the Air Force Civil Engineering Global Community. So it literally opened my eyes to an entire world where there are people just like me who are serving to ensure the functionality of the built environment. And that was when I knew that's the direction I'm heading. There's a lot more, but I'll probably wait for your next questions. But that's where my trajectory began in terms of I'm a part of this community. I just didn't.
Totally. Thank you, Tom. What a fascinating insight. So 20 years as a civil engineer officer, overseeing the development of some of the facilities. Any memorable architectural locations that you want to talk about during that 20-year career? Any story positive?
In terms of positive experiences, I can't think of one that wasn't in some form or fashion. Because I got a chance to work at different installations here in the US. And also I was assigned in South Korea.
Oh, wow.
I was assigned in the UK briefly. I did spend some time in the Middle East, but that was not for tourism during the time period. So I actually saw a wide range of architecture that I only knew about from my studies of architectural history. I got a chance to actually see indigenous architecture. We actually have examples of that here in the US, certainly not as old, but it's still here nevertheless. And it gave me a better appreciation, not only for those things that we really have in common in terms of being human, but how at the core, we really are looking for the same things. To take care of your family, to make a difference in somebody's life. Now, this is one thing that I do remember that shaped how I served in the Air Force, and it continued well after I took off the Air Force uniform. And it speaks to why it's so important that facility managers serve an integral role within the decision-making on any initiative that's going to have an impact on the built and natural environment. Here's what I encountered. This was at my first duty station. I hadn't been there for very long. I was asked to do a review of a particular facility that had just been completed and turned over to the new occupants. And what was interesting was, of course, we had our ribbon cutting ceremony and cake and candy and drinks, snapshots to let people know we have this new asset that's been added into our inventory. When the users moved in, of course, we used phones back then. I mean, landline connections. They were looking for the jacks in order to connect their phones, and they didn't see any. Because of the lack of coordination between civil engineers, FM, and communications, IT, there was no coordination in terms of making sure that communications installed those phone lines and those connection ports. So the phones that were acquired by the new using organization could plug them in. It was a major embarrassment. Literally, we had to go back into the facility and put surface mounted conduit all over these new walls. It was an eyesore when it was done, but it was more expedient than cutting through the walls at those different spacing requirements, recessing the newly installed conduit, and then now replastering. I never forgot that. I never forgot that. There was another incident at another location where communications was now responsible for installing fiber optic lines. Wonderful. We're moving a little closer to the 21st century. And they hired a contractor to do the necessary trenching. They did not coordinate with civil engineering. So literally, we are getting emergency work orders repeatedly because of power lines or water lines that had been severed as a result of the trenching to make room for the installation of the fiber optic conduit. That happened only once. It got corrected very quickly. Where I'm going with this is, in light of these problems that were occurring, it made sense for our two organizations to better coordinate with one another, establish defined processes so that people knew exactly what they needed to do in order to accomplish what they sought to achieve, coordinating with the right organizations at the right time so we could avoid those mishaps that I described to you.
Yes.
So people started better understanding and appreciating not just FM, but also IT, and how we both play an integral role to ensuring not only the functionality of the built environment, but also helping end users achieve their organizational objectives, because they will need buildings and they will need communications.
Yes.
And that shaped me literally from that point forward all the way until now.
That's a very profound story. Thank you for sharing that. 20 years with Air Force, and then you transitioned to the private sector. How was the transition to the private sector, and how did you adapt yourself?
It was easier than you might expect. And the military is a very hierarchical organization, complete with full structure. And it needs to be, given the military mission.
Yeah.
What made my transition easy was two reasons that come primarily to mind. Number one, I was going to be doing the same thing that I did when I wore the uniform, less the bombs, bullets, and chemical warfare training. So I didn't have to learn something new, different processes for a different organization, of course, but the knowledge and the skills and the experience that I had already lent myself to being able to transition smoothly. The other part of it too was I was approached about joining Booz Allen Hamilton by somebody who I worked with when he was still on active duty in my prior organization. So there was already a connection in terms of people who I was already familiar with, and a culture that was comparable to the one that I would be transitioning from. So it made my acclimation that much easier. It made a big difference. There was another part of it too, that actually, I would not have said it would not have been a deal breaker if it didn't happen. But I wanted to make sure that Booz Allen Hamilton knew that my service goes beyond what I'll be doing specifically for the company. At that time, I was already second vice chair of IFMA's Global Board of Directors. Unless there was a problem, normally the second vice chair becomes first vice chair and then the chairman. So I wanted them to know that IFMA is real important to me. And I wanted to be able to continue my service with IFMA, but understand it's going to take time. I remember when I was in Iraq, actually, and I was approached about becoming the second vice chair. The individual who approached me wanted to make sure I understood what the time commitment was going to be. 800 hours, 800 hours. And that was a conservative estimate. When I joined the board of directors, we were just about to enter the great global recession. So it was not business as usual. We were doing everything we could to make sure we could keep our doors open. So it consumed a lot more time. Fortunately, those who I worked for at Booz Allen Hamilton saw the value in my continuing to serve at this executive level for IFMA. So those, I told you about the first two things, but that was the third one. The first two was necessary. It had to be in order for me to be able to function comfortably in this new environment. The third one, it would not have been a deal breaker, but it was still very important to me because at this time, I mean, I'm past 1998, okay? I know the IFMA value proposition. I've been to a world workplace. As a result of my experience at that World Workplace in 2003, I literally was the ambassador for IFMA in the Department of Defense. It's not official, but I was the one telling everybody who served just like I did, regardless of the military service uniform that they wore, that you need to know about IFMA, because this is how we can continue to develop our skills. We can acquire new knowledge in terms of education, and we can connect with individuals just like us and recognize our role and potential service in the greater global community.
Well said, Tom. Thank you. So in 1998, you came across IFMA because Colonel Sinclair requested you to join in, and then you went on. From then on, 25 years have passed. Still, you are a very solid advocate of IFMA, and you will continue to be a very, very big advocate of IFMA. Talk us through your involvement in how did IFMA help your professional journey so far? And second part of the question is, as a former chairman of IFMA Global Board of Directors, talk us through about the initiatives and projects that you got involved as well.
Okay. I'm going to ask you the second part of that question again. Could you say that again?
As a former chairman of IFMA Global Board of Directors, you might have been witnessing some great initiatives or projects that were involved. Talk us through some of the fascinating stories from the time when you were there in the global board. And even before that, how did IFMA influence your professional journey?
Okay, well, that's easy. For the first part of it, actually, I'll start with the second. When I served on the board, we made an investment decision. We looked at the market space, and we recognized that there was something that was lacking. We already had the CFM, the Certified Facility Manager designation, and it still remains as the premier credential for folks that serve in our profession. There are others out there comparable, but from a global perspective, the CFM is most recognized. But the CFM literally targets mid-level managers. As a matter of fact, in order for you to be eligible to take the CFM examination, you literally have to have at least 5 years of work experience, and that experience has to be provided to IFMA, and they will evaluate your CV just to make sure that you've acquired enough experience that you can answer those questions because they're experiential based. What we didn't have was an initial credential, a foundational credential, something that would provide credibility for somebody who had just entered our career field. Whether they're a young person who graduated from high school or from university, or somebody who may have transitioned from another career field. So the decision was to now launch the FMP, the Facility Management Professional. So the FMP is all knowledge-based, and it's really been enhanced since the decision was made back when I was on the board. This was around 2007 timeframe, if I'm not mistaken. Whereby now there are student guides that have been produced, sample exam questions in those student guides. And if you retain the knowledge, then you will be able to apply that knowledge for questions that are based primarily on that knowledge, not experience. Because this is something that levels the playing field. It gives you an understanding, if you're a hiring official, what you should expect this individual to know. And you will be exposed to 4 of the 11 competencies. And we decided it would be these four for the following reasons. The first one was operations and maintenance. Still today, about half of our personnel work within operations and maintenance. It makes sense. It's tactical. You get a work order request, several every single day. Your schedule is never the same as you originally planned because things break and you just don't know when it's going to happen. So most of our personnel actually work within operations and maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
We also require you to complete the project management module. Why? Me. I graduated from a university that provided exposure to the built science. So architecture, but you have engineers, you have planners. These are the individuals who typically serve as project managers. So we know enough to be able to talk to those who would be involved in order to bring this project to fruition. So if you're going to be entering an organization as a facility manager, we wanted to make sure that you had a foundational understanding of what project management was all about, especially if you had a degree from architecture or one of the engineering programs. Thirdly, leadership and strategy. This is a cultural mind shift. I actually have a presentation that I give, and it has information that was provided by the U.S. National Academy of Science. It basically shows the evolution of FM from around the 1970s up until now. And we began, not surprisingly, in the operations and maintenance area. We were the building managers. But over time, the expectations expanded to include construction management, to include project management, to include move management. I actually have a printout of it right here. So I'm just going to read straight from this page.
Please do, please do.
Not a problem. So then we expanded into energy management and utility management, space planning, business support. Now we're at a level where we're expected to not just manage projects, but major capital investment projects. We may not be an expert in construction management. We don't have to be, as long as we have someone on our team that is. And it's very defined in terms of what our roles and responsibilities are to ensure that we can accomplish everything on time, in budget, and based on the desired quality of the user. Also, strategic planning and portfolio management. What I teach regularly in any venue, and I'll share it here, facility management represents one of the three most expensive assets that's available to an organization for it to be successful. First one typically is the human. Number one, you can't get processes done unless you have humans to get them done. Yes, there's automation out there that can help us do it much more efficiently, effectively, maybe economically, but you still need human involvement. Because today, despite everything that's being shared about the advancements of computer technology, it's still based on binary language, 1, 0. So you have to program it to do what you want it to do. It can't think for itself, figure something else that it's not programmed to do yet. Processing information, absolutely. But the human brain still is the greatest computer that's available for our use. So, and in most societies, you got to pay us. So we're expensive. And not only just our salaries, but also those things that are associated with being a part of the organization, healthcare, dental, time off, whatever that might be. Number two tends to be whatever the product or service that the company is offering. Talk about Elon Musk. His company, SpaceX, they design and build rocket ships. They're pretty expensive. So yes, that's going to show up on the balance sheet. Number three, inevitably, is going to be your facility portfolio. And I'm not looking at the acquisition cost. It's design and construction. I'm talking about the entire life cycle cost, because these facilities stay in our portfolio a whole lot longer than it took for them to be entered into our portfolio. So facilities are very, very expensive. So from a leadership and a strategy perspective, we have to understand that we, although may be a cost expense, absolutely, unless we're working for a hotel or some type of entertainment energy, we're not charging lease space. Okay, so we're an expense. But the change in the mindset is recognizing that we are a critical enabler of organizational success. And that was actually said by the CEO of a company who happened to be the president of CoreNet. This was about 15 years ago. Now, corporate real estate and FM, we have an interesting relationship. It's not always been good. But in this case, this president of CoreNet recognized that corporate real estate and FM needs to develop a mindset of being a critical enabler as opposed to just a cost center. He's absolutely right. The last part of it is finance and business. And I shared this last because most of us tend not to be strong in that area. In university, I did not have to take a finance class at all for my undergrad degree. I did have to take 2 classes when I earned my first master's, but admittedly, they were applicational. They weren't theoretic. So I just got the basics of it. One of the things that CoreNet CEO said was that we have to think like a decision maker. So who's sitting at the table that's making these decisions? The members of the C-suite, the CEO, the COO, the CFO. And the CFO has specific responsibilities in terms of ensuring that companies' fiscal survivability and solvency. So since we're not the only ones competing for the money, I mean, we think these facilities are important. That's our job. We can make a direct line connection to how completing this project can help to accomplish a specific goal that the company has identified as being important. We want to recruit the best and brightest talent. Well, most people like that really want to work in nice facilities. Okay, so we can make the line connection. But if we don't understand finance and we don't understand their language, then we're not going to be able to communicate effectively to the individuals around that table that have to know that. Yes. So we can't just focus on the function of it. We have to recognize what the economic impact is going to be. And since we are a cost center, any business case that we present really needs to include, number one, we're reducing costs. Secondly, we're going to have to let those around the table know when they can expect to get a return on their investment. So there's a very simple equation that I share in the college classes and in presentations, and I'll share with you right now. If we as facility managers can understand this, the rest gets a lot easier. Revenue minus expenses equals profit. Very simple. Revenue, the money we bring in. Expenses, what we have to spend in order to bring that money in. Anything left over now can be used now for later investment, development of our people, hiring folks. So it's very simple. So the FMP literally provides that kind of knowledge in those 4 core competency areas, whereas once you've earned that credential, then there's a standardization and an expectation from those who would now hire you to say, this person knows FM. Now, of course, it's only 4 of the entire 11. And IFMA since that time has developed, courses for you to acquire the knowledge for the other 7. But that was the most significant thing that I can recall that we did when I served on the board.
Thank you, Tom. That's fascinating. So we have the second half of the talk. So I'll just go a little bit more on specifics here. So the Over the years, you might have worked in the private industry, FM projects as well. Talk us through some of the most memorable FM projects.
Hmm. The one that comes immediately to mind, which was actually pretty cool, was I had the opportunity of serving on a long-term project that helped the Air Force transform the way it provided what we recognize as FM to a more asset management approach. This is a true story. As a matter of fact, the chief of FM at that time, who was hired by Booz Allen Hamilton later on and became my supervisor, he was hired as a vice president, had an opportunity to talk to Tom. Now, he wanted me to call him by his first name. That's not going to happen. Sir, you're general. You always will be in my mind. But I told him, I had a question for you. Why did the Air Force senior leadership decide to accept your proposal to transform the civil engineer career field, FM, to using an asset management approach? And he told me very clearly and succinctly, the Air Force made some major funding cuts, and we were impacted by it. He shared with me his experience meeting with the Air Force Chief of Staff just shortly after he had been hired as the new Air Force Civil Engineer, Chief of FM for the entire Air Force. Upon introduction, the Chief of Staff told the general, I have reduced your annual operating budget by 30%. It's done. And oh, by the way, I freezed the hiring actions so that I can reduce your personnel strength by 20%. These are decisions that were made before the general came in to take over as the new Air Force engineer. So there was no negotiating. The money was gone. The Chief of Staff also said, our expectation is you will continue to provide the same level of service that have been enjoyed by all Air Force personnel and any visitors to our installation. I said, wow. So the general, of course, he's still a two-star general now, decided to do a core of discovery. He literally went to different organizations that experienced the same operating conditions, loss of funding, loss of personnel, same expectations in terms of levels of service. And that's when he learned that there were other corporate organizations, private sector organizations that went through the exact same thing and they overcame. He also learned that New Zealand went through something similar from a government organization perspective. Now, I did not know this. I had to look this up afterwards. But Auckland, the capital of New Zealand, went dark for 6 days. Why? Because funding that had been appropriated from the government that was supposed to be used to take care of all things FM typically goes to those things that people can see. Folks get excited when they see buildings. They don't get as excited when it comes to underground power lines and water systems. So what happened was the maintenance and repair on those things that are out of sight, out of mind didn't happen to the point where the system collapsed. So for 6 days, it had no power. Of course, an investigation was conducted and they found out that investment funding had not been used in order to keep those systems in optimum operating condition. So literally, it changed how New Zealand focused their resources, what limited they had, on those things that were most important to ensure that entire organization, in this case, their federal government, could operate in their capital. New Zealand caught wind of that. The UK caught wind of that and actually developed standards and processes so that they could avoid what happened in Auckland. So the general knew this, and that's why he had sold the idea of taking an asset management approach. He decided that the best way for us to ensure that we can optimize the use and value of all of these facilities is to look at it from an enterprise portfolio perspective. No longer would funding just be allocated for a base without context of could that money be better used at other installations. So the entire portfolio of 166 Air Force installations, to include every facility and supporting infrastructure, had a holistic review. And they decided exactly what asset needed it the most. The worst gets fixed first. For those assets that were going to be retained in the inventory, the worst got fixed first. I remember the general said he would know if we've changed the culture of the Air Force when a wing commander, that person who's in charge of the installation, that would be the equivalent of the CEO for an Air Force base, when that wing commander said, even though this money is available for us, it's needed more at another installation. The worst gets fixed for. You're no longer just concerned about your piece of property. You're concerned about the entire enterprise. So I got the opportunity when I transitioned out of the Air Force to literally be assigned to this major undertaking.
Yes.
It's the most significant change that ever happened to the Air Force civil engineer career field in 25 years. It was exciting. So it was a great experience for me. Not only did I get a chance to use the knowledge, skills, and experience that I had acquired as an Air Force civil engineering officer, but I got a chance to work again with those same individuals who I knew when I wore the blue uniform. I'm just wearing a blue suit now. But I also, because of my experience with IFMA and being exposed to other national level professional associations, I learned a lot about asset management long before I learned about the opportunity to now serve in this role. So my experience with IFMA, particularly on the board and getting exposed to the way we do things differently around the globe, and then now this tasking, once I've joined Booz Allen Hamilton, I realized that literally everything happens for a reason. And hindsight tends to be very acute. When you look back and you see all of those things that happen and how they all line things up for other opportunities in the future, I saw a clear connection. So yes, incredible experience I had with Booz Allen Hamilton, enhanced based on my experience also with IFMA and serving on the global board.
Totally. Thank you for sharing that, Tom. Again, you know what? Already you have a very successful career, and today you are doing much wider projects, as you were telling me about Saudi Arabia and other part of your current role. But you still find time to educate and share what you know, both as a IFMA FM course instructor and also as an FM degree program advisory council. Talk us through about some of the memorable experiences of education as well.
Okay. I would not be doing what I'm doing right now had it not been for what I learned at Florida A&M University. Without question. It always bothered me, though, that when I served on the board, and I got a chance to go to other annual conferences like the one provided by Euro FM. So that's the consortium of national level facility management organizations. They come together every year. In terms of education, the Europeans far exceed the Americans in terms of FM degree programs. Now, I understand the history and the reason why. Simply speaking, America really has a lot of resources. Much of it is still untapped. Europeans don't. Much smaller area. And all of the resources, if they are available, you have to go off land to get them, like oil. So that's why there's a lot of offshore or offshore well drilling, in the UK, the Northern Bering Sea, all of that. So the Europeans have always had to be more efficient through the use of their natural resources. whereas America, not so much.
Mm.
So again, logic in terms of why FM programs exist in Europe. I remember going to the Hans University of Applied Science and being asked to speak back in 2014. That school had 600 FM students. 600. I was completely blown away. Now, I had seen literature about all of the different FM programs that are available within the EU, but to actually be in an auditorium filled with FM students, it completely blew me away. And I started thinking, you know, I have my American hat on now. We really need to do a better job of helping to develop programs like this. Well, of course, we have the IFMA Foundation, and the IFMA Foundation focuses on academics and scholarships. So I partnered with the director of academics at the time, and I got a chance to make a presentation at my alma mater back in 2010. My father is Mr. FAMU. I won't explain what that means, but most people don't know me by my name. They know me as being Tommy's son, even now. He is that well known back at my university, our university. He graduated from FAMU too. So he happened to connect with the dean of the School of Business, actually during a reception following a funeral. Talked about his son serving on the board of directors, talked about his first experience going to a world workplace, which at this time was in Orlando, made it easy for him to visit, and it blew him away too. And he wanted to convince the dean of the value of hearing me talk about establishing an FM degree program at Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. Dad was successful. So I try to visit my parents every year. For that particular trip, I took a couple of extra days because I got accepted. Well, an invitation was extended to me to make a business case to help the business school decide on whether they're going to start a new FM degree program. So the director of academic affairs for the IFMA Foundation and I made a presentation. At the end of that presentation, it was silence. I wasn't sure what that meant. Then this person literally sitting in front of me stood up and said, I don't know about anyone else, but we need to start this here. He actually became one of the program directors and still remains a program director at the School of Business, where you can receive now the undergraduate degree in facility management. But it didn't end there. My school had found out that not only had I come back to Tallahassee, but I was making this presentation at the School of Business and Industry. So the dean of the School of Architecture contacted me and said, Tommy, you coming over here too, aren't you? I said, yes. Yes, I am. Now, because I had actually tried to reach the School of Architecture over the years, and admittedly, it did not make a connection. This time it did. So I made the same presentation in that afternoon to the dean and other key faculty members at the School of Architecture. And they decided they were going to do the same thing. The School of Architecture is offering the master's degree program in facility management. And of course, the School of Business has the undergrad. It is the first time, to my knowledge, that you could earn a degree from that university and take courses from specific schools that normally would not be allowable to do.
Wow.
Yeah, so School of Architecture students could actually take now upper level courses in the School of Business and vice versa. And the reason why this worked so well was because, number one, you didn't have to develop any additional classes. Because when you think about FM, it does require the technical side. You get that from the School of Architecture. It requires the management side and the business side, which comes from the School of Business. So you didn't have to create any new courses. You just had to allow students to take your existing courses. And we developed that program to make sure that when the IFMA Foundation sent an accreditation team to review the curriculum, they would see that all 11 core competencies would be topics of discussion, and the students would have to develop their and demonstrate their competency in applying them. As a result of all of this, the first FM degree courses were offered 2 years later. This is 2012. We also received IFMA accreditation that same year. About 3 years later, the master's degree program received IFMA accreditation as well. I was offered an opportunity to teach one of those courses. I said, how could I turn that down? Like I said, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now had I not received a foundation in terms of an academic degree from Florida A&M University. There aren't enough FM programs in the United States as it is. There was an opportunity to establish one. And since I remember telling that crowd in the auditorium at the Hans University of Applied Science that at some point in time, I do plan to transition from vocation to vacation.
Yes.
So I have an investment in all of you because we've done well as a global professional community, but the only way we're going to be able to sustain our ability to meet expectations, which continues to grow because more things are expected from us. I told you, we're into strategic sourcing and strategic planning now. I need all of you to acquire the knowledge now. I meandered literally through my initial Air Force career. I did everything I was expected to do as an Air Force officer, but I did not know about FM. It was when I learned about FM because of Lieutenant Colonel Sinclair, I said, that's my trajectory. And I've been focused ever since. But I lost 10 years of not knowing. All of you know about FM before you graduate from university. So let me share this statistic with you. This is also what continues to inspire me. The individual who stood up and said, we need to establish this program at the School of Business and Industry is actually the department head for marketing. He has a PhD in service management.
Wow.
He actually did a study working with the IFMA Foundation to recognize how we are losing our core capability and competency in the workplace. Why? Because the average age, and this is a peer-reviewed paper, the average age of a facility manager at that time, and this was 2013, if I remember correctly, was about 50 years of age. And on the average, it took about 20 years to develop to be the type of facility manager where you literally could serve as the leader of the organization. Now, factor that into the fact that over half of our workforce today is eligible for retirement today. So how do you close the gap in the knowledge and experience that's necessary so that when folks like me, that who will, God willing, transition from vocation to vacation, leave the workplace, those positions need to be filled. So a pipeline needs to be established, but you don't have as much time to do so because we could all retire within the next 5 to 15 years. It takes 20 years to build an FM to lead an organization. Academics absolutely plays a critical role in that. And that's why most of what I do now focuses on equipping individuals so they can have the knowledge to be able to serve. Yes. I can't give them the experience, okay? But I can give you the knowledge so that you can make deliberate decisions in terms of what you're going to do. And if offered the opportunity, and some students have taken advantage of this, I give them career counseling. Because education is a means to an end. It's not the end itself. So you're getting this degree in FM. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And ideally, you're investing your time, your talent, and somebody's treasure to earn this degree. It should be helping you to get to that desired state sometime in the future. If it's not, why are you doing this? So while I'm still breathing, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that that knowledge is being shared, either by me or I will point you in the direction that will help you get the knowledge. It's all based on where are you going from here.
Yes.
And if FM is a logical, deliberate decision to make, I will suggest you do that. But if it's not, I've seen enough to recognize where you may want to consider investing your time, your talent, and your treasure so that you can acquire the knowledge that can later be used to gain the experience that will help you grow as a professional in whatever your chosen vocation is going to be.
Thank you. Continue to inspire us, Tom. That's great. So I think we have talked a lot about you on a professional level. Let's talk more, Tom, in a personal level. So talk us through your hobbies and interests outside work.
Her name is Faith.
Okay.
She is our first grandchild, and she's a little girl. You can see how I'm smiling right now.
Yes.
I enjoy my time around that little girl. And she enjoys her time around me. Fortunately, she lives here. So whenever I'm about to go someplace, she says, "Can I follow Papa? Can I follow Papa?" So whether it's leaving the house or actually coming upstairs with me,
yes,
she brings a smile to my face.
Nice.
She makes Papa happy. That's my buddy.
Oh.
So that is an outside FM interest that absolutely commands a lot of my time. And I'm glad to do that. I'm glad to do that. I certainly love my family. We're actually, one of the decisions we made early in our relationship as man and wife is we take actually family vacations. Didn't see much value to them at the time, but I definitely do now. So we have one planned in August timeframe. So not only will my children join us, and of course, our granddaughter, but my parents and my brother will be joining us. They all live in Florida right now. We're going down to Disney World. So that's planned for August. And I'm looking to bring the family together and we just have some fun. Another thing that I enjoy doing, which unfortunately takes a lot more time than I really should allow it to, is I really love Star Trek.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think of Star Trek as what has already happened, as opposed to a science fiction show about what could be in the future. I can give you specific details. I've seen every original series episode at least 100 times. Yet and still, at 7 o'clock my local time, I am in my bedroom, away from everyone else, because this is my time.
Yes.
I have my tablet with me because I always hear or see something that I didn't catch when I saw this episode over 100 times already. And I'll get to my tablet and I'm looking it up. And there's an entire database out there of individuals who've pieced together all of the books, all of the novels, all of the movies, all of the television shows. You have a full history. Again, I look at Star Trek as what has already happened, not projected in the future. So those things absolutely keep me engaged. There's other stuff, but in terms of what consumes most of my time, it's my granddaughter, it's our family, and it's Star Trek.
Oh, I think we'll have a special episode on Star Trek and we talk about all Star Trek, but thank you for sharing, and beautiful family, everybody, all the blessings to continue to happen to you. And
thank you.
yes, just to one or two fun questions, and then a few people in your life you already shared, and then final few questions, then we'll end the podcast. So if you could manage any facility from any fictional world, which one would you choose to manage and why?
Oh, wow. Any facility from any fictional world, which
Yeah.
would I choose and why? I've never been asked that question before. Bear with me for just a moment as I reflect. You know, there's really only one that comes to mind right now. Not surprisingly, Starfleet headquarters.
Yeah, I was imagining you would say that.
And I'll tell you why. First, I'll start with the what. Okay, Starfleet headquarters literally is the headquarters for the United Federation of Planets exploratory arm. Yes, they do defense and sometimes they have to do offense. But in terms of what the United Federation Planets is all about, which is establishing relationships that will allow the Federation to expand, Starfleet is literally their vanguard. They're the initial ambassadors that will go out and seek out that new life, establish diplomatic relationships, and of course, protect Federation citizens for those who may not necessarily support what the Federation is all about, sees them as a threat for whatever it might be. So again, since facilities are critical enablers of organizational success, Starfleet headquarters absolutely would have to be managed in such a way so that the chief of staff of Starfleet and all of those senior individuals have a functional environment that would allow them to perform their necessary duties and responsibilities, accomplish those processes that lead to those products that ensures that that organization achieves maximum performance capability. I can't even imagine what a facility like that would truly need. I've seen the movies repeatedly, okay? Obviously, they're relying a lot on technology, relying a lot on power. I mean, it takes a lot of power in order to operate a transport system. Some of the newer television shows have transportation devices that literally you're walking on them no differently than you walk on a sidewalk on a street, and you show up in another location on Earth. That's how you enter some of these Starfleet headquarters buildings, through a transporter. I mean, they have doors, obviously, but most people come in through a transportation device that literally looks like one of those security X-ray entryways where you have to walk through and you put your bags on the side. That's what they look like now. So yeah, if I had an opportunity to manage a facility, that one would be pretty cool. After that, it would have to be Starfleet Academy, where the students are being educated. And not all of them actually join Starfleet as an officer. Some of them go to Starfleet Academy, but they retain their position as a private citizen.
Nice, thank you. And again, you did share a few people already, but who are the people, both in your personal and professional life, that you considered yourself grateful to have?
Wow. The dean of the School of Architecture when I entered in 1981, she was a visionary, and she recognized the significant role that each of us could play, provided we graduated from the program. She's always been an encourager.
Yes.
And I relied on her heavily during those first few years because architecture programs aren't for the faint of heart. They are designed to a trip, meaning there's not an expectation that everybody who begins as a freshman will graduate as a senior. So her counsel and support was extremely important to me. When I left the university, I would have to say the next person that made a major influence on me was my first squadron commander. He was in charge of FM for this installation that I went to. By this time, I had decided the Air Force is for me. So this commander had a career counseling session with me, my first one, as a matter of fact. And he asked me, Tom, what do you want to do? And I, in my youthful arrogance, said, sir, I want to sit in your chair as a commander. He said, do you know what it takes to get here? No, sir. Well, let me help you with that. So he literally mapped out a career path. In order for you to increase the probability for you to get selected to serve as a commander in charge of FM, these are the things that you would have been expected to do. So when your CV comes in, they would say, yep, that's the pick. So literally, it was a reverse engineering opportunity. I recognize the importance of a master's degree. I recognize the importance of serving in different positions within the FM life cycle. I recognize it couldn't always be field operations, meaning at the installation level. I had to work at the headquarters too, to develop policy and guidance and understand how we provide resources to help these field level FM organizations be able to accomplish the mission of their installation. So that was number two. Third, I would have to say my third commander. By this time, I had gotten to the practice of meeting with commanders just to find out what their expectations are, maybe tee off the career development talk. When I met with this commander, it was in Washington, D.C. I said, sir, what do you expect of me? He said, why are you asking me? I said, well, you're my commander. He said, anything that I need you to do is irrelevant. What you need to know is what the Air Force expects of you. That means read the regulations. If the Air Force wanted you to know something, they would put it in writing. So from that point, even till now, I find out what the policies, the procedures, the practices are for any organization because they're there for a reason. I told you about Colonel Sinclair. Mm-hmm. After that, I would have to say, this is now IFMA now. One of the previous presidents and CEO of the International Facility Management Association. He is one of the best examples of a servant leader I've ever encountered. And it was his selflessness and focusing on the needs of the members and the industry that helped us get through the great global recession. You're going to have to look who that individual is up. I'm not going to mention it by name, but you know when the global recession was, so it's very simple to figure out who that individual was. I actually did papers on him for my doctorate degree program on a textbook example of a servant leader. Last but not least, in terms of human beings are concerned, I'd have to say my wife. My wife has been an avid supporter of me, even when I wasn't. She has served to encourage me when I really needed it. There's nothing that I would have been able to accomplish had I not had her support with it. We're a team. We're one, actually. So she has always been there for me. And that's why when I do transition from vocation to vacation, she will be by my side and we'll be enjoying the opportunity to do certain things that we weren't able to do because unfortunately it had to be prioritized, and taking care of our family will always be number one. But they're adults now. And as much as I enjoy being around my granddaughter, she has parents. So my wife and I, we've already begun a taste of what we're looking to continue to do. She came with me to Cairo last year. I spoke at the African Facility Management Conference. That took about 2 days. But for the rest of the week, we enjoyed Cairo and we went up to Alexandria. So my intention is every year, if it's an FM related activity or not, we're going to go someplace and we're just going to enjoy time with one another. It's one of many ways that I want to show her how much I appreciate everything that she's done, how much she's sacrificed to help me to be able to do what I've been able to do, to include, again, 800 plus hours a year.
Wow.
Serving on the IFMA Global Board of Directors. I think that probably ends that.
100%. I think with whatever you have received, you are given 10 times more to the people around you, Tom, and thank you for everything you do. So last question, again, looking back, what do you think is the future of FM? At the same time, what's that one piece of advice you would like to leave to the FM listeners who would like to make an aspiring difference like you in the field of facility and asset management?
Very simple. Two things I would say is we have to help our respective organizations develop a culture where they recognize us as an integral partner in the success of that organization. We can't be an appendage, something that's thought about when there's a problem, like an appendix. Okay, no, we need to be an integral player, partner in the process. The other part of it is we have to recognize that we are an integral player. We can't afford to just focus on our own stovepipe department and not recognize that everything we do has an impact on something else. We might not see it immediately, but it absolutely does. So unless we recognize who we are and what we can do, how can we help others outside of FM recognize that we should be integral partners in the continued success of our organization, short-term and long-term?
Thank you, Tom. That was absolutely brilliant close to the episode. So, Tom, before we close, is there any part of your life or career, or is there anything else you would share to the listeners?
There's not enough time. But you asked some great questions. I got a chance to share everything that I hoped I would have an opportunity to share with you. So thank you for this. And hopefully this won't be the last time we chat.
Of course, no. Thank you so much for your time. And it's been an absolute privilege to host you at Baachu Talk FM. Wish you, your family, and everybody around you all the good health and happiness, Tom. Continue to inspire us, continue to stay healthy, and I'll definitely speak to you soon.
Thank you, sir. Take care and have a blessed day.
You too. You too. To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Please do visit www.baachurain.com/Baachu Talk FM podcast. To this specific episode link to everything that was mentioned in this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, review, and share Baachu Talk FM podcast. We will see you at the next episode with another special guest. Until then, it's Bhaskar Sundram signing off.